starts that there is no longer going to be yelling in your house. And you know what? It's as easy as a decision that you make today. You can make that decision right now, and you can see a change in your household this instant today. Because it's really hard for somebody to yell at somebody who won't yell back. You know, if you're constantly yelling back and you're constantly engaging and fighting, and they're screaming at you and you're screaming at them and they're screaming at you and you're screaming back, number one, nobody's hearing anything that the other person is saying. Number two, that other person can never look inward at themselves because they can always point their finger back at you and say, aha, you get out of control and it makes me get out of control. But if you will make up your mind that no matter what is going on, no matter how many times they provoke you or how many times they push your buttons, that you are not giving into it, you will begin to see some change take place. They will not want to yell back at nobody. You can only yell at somebody who won't yell back at you for so long before you start to point the finger back at yourself and say, maybe I am a little bit out of control. What is my part in this? But if you want to just keep conflicting, then just keep screaming, because you'll never get anywhere if you don't make up your mind to do that. Do you believe that it's possible for you to never yell again? See, we look to the other people when we think, well, I'm doing better than so-and-so, and I'm doing better than that couple, and well, I only yell when I'm really mad or when they push me really hard, and I keep my cool for most of the time, but you know, Jesus is our measuring stick, and I can't imagine Jesus walking out and yelling at the disciples and telling them, you know, what a mess they've made. Why didn't you have enough faith, and I can't believe you couldn't get out and walk on that water all the way to me. You started sinking, you stinking Peter. You know, God didn't yell at his disciples. He talked to them. He stayed in control with a good tone of voice all the time. You absolutely can discuss a matter without losing your temper, without raising your voice. If you cannot discuss a matter without resorting to yelling, a wise woman would stop the conversation. You are better to keep quiet and leave the room than to continue to engage in a battle that's never going to be won. You can stop yelling. The second absolute that I want to talk on this morning is something that we talked a little bit about yesterday, or last week. It's never try to solve a problem in the heat of the argument. And I think a lot of people make this mistake because, you know, it's hard when you're in the middle of your emotions. Last night I had a perfect example in my house. I had a rough day. Maybe you guys could tell from this morning, but we've had a couple of deaths in my family this week. And so I've been at an emotional high. And so my daughter came in last night, and my son, I was talking to him about being disciplined, and he'd left his homework out on the floor, and he hadn't taken it to school like he was supposed to. And so I walked into his room to get ready to say his prayers, and I was just talking to him about not being lazy, but about being disciplined. And as I started to talk to him, he stuck his fingers in his ears. You know, kind of irritated me a little bit. And so I started to take care of that, and when I took care of that, I came out, and there was just papers everywhere that I'd already told the kids to pick up, and, you know, I started on a little mini rant, okay, a little emotional, and I said, get in here and pick up those papers, and Aspen, why are you doing this, and why is that stuff still on the floor, and who did this? And I mean, I wasn't screaming or anything, but you could tell I'd had a rough day, and my daughter walked in, and she said to me, what is wrong with you, Mommy? And I looked at her and I said, well, I've had kind of an emotional week, Aspen. Could you possibly understand that? And she said, yes, Mommy. But you know, you can have a good day or you can have a bad day. And if you want to have a good day, then you're going to have to change your attitude to have a good attitude. And if you want to have a bad day, then keep acting the way that you're acting, Mommy, and your day will get worse. And I said, go to your room now. And then I had to eat a piece of humble pie, and I walked back into each of their bedrooms, and I sat down on their bed, and I said, I've had a rough week, and I've gotten a little bit emotional, and I'm sorry. And you know what? Aspen was right, because they all heard her say it. She's right. I'm a little bit emotional right now, and I need to get it under control. I'm sorry for acting that way. You know, even in the heat of the moment, you can stop and make a choice to turn in the other direction. And my son, who had stuck his fingers in his ears, now pulled them out of his ears and cried and sat on my lap and talked to me about how he was feeling and what he was doing. And we turned what was an ugly situation into something really positive. I'm not perfect by any means. When you are in the heat of an emotion, you've got to really watch how you speak to the people that you love. Never try to resolve a problem in the heat of the argument. You got to use common sense. Proverbs 10:21 says, "The lips of the righteous nourish many, but fools die for a lack of sense." You know, it's not rocket science that you're not going to solve a problem by screaming at the other person. It's not rocket science to know that when you're emotional is probably not the best time to make some life-changing, life-altering decision. Yet, once we get fired up, and once we start going, we just keep going and we don't know how to stop it. We've got to remember to walk away. You got to hold your tongue and refrain from talking in the midst of your emotions. 1 Corinthians 9:24 says, "Do you not know that those who run in a race all run, but one receives the prize? Run in such a way that you may obtain it." See, I think we get stuck in this rat race, this thing called life, and we just start running, and we don't really run with purpose. We just run. We just try to survive. We just try to get through the day. We just try to get through the week. We try to just get through the year, or get through diapers, or get through potty training, or get through the night. We've got to run the race with purpose. We've got to run it intentionally. We've got to set our minds and keep them set on higher things, on living the way Jesus wants us to live. We've got to set our minds ahead of time and purpose in our hearts to not do these things in order to see them come to pass in our relationships. You've got to compete, not just to get to the end, but to make your relationships flourish. Let's go on. "And everyone who competes for the prize is temperate in all things. Now they do it to obtain a perishable crown, but we for an imperishable crown. Therefore I run thus, not with uncertainty. Thus I fight, not as one who beats the air, but I discipline my body and bring it into subjection." I discipline my body to bring it into subjection. Remember, we keep talking about how this stuff hurts. This hurts your flesh. These are the times that it hurts your flesh. When you are in the heat of the moment, you have got to decide beforehand what you are going to do. If you do not decide beforehand how you are going to respond, you are going to get out of control quickly. Your muscles, when you exercise the muscle of patience, when you exercise the muscle of self-control, when you exercise the muscle of self-discipline, that muscle gets stronger. And every time you take the higher road, those muscles of the fruits of the Spirit get stronger and stronger. And it works twofold, because not only are you strengthening your ability to stand strong in trying times and not give in to your emotions and not give in to those moments of screaming fits or rages, but you are also weakening that other antagonistic muscle, so to speak. So not only are you, when you exercise self-control, making that self-control stronger, but you're making that emotions running wild muscle weaker at the same time. So it works twofold. And if you will consistently exercise those muscles, you'll get to the point where it really doesn't hurt that much anymore. These things were really hard. When the Lord began to emphasize to me that I was really lacking in discipline. See, my son who's lacks in discipline, he reminds me a lot of me. When I would walk in that door, I'd throw my shoes off, I'd throw my backpack off when I was a kid, and I'd just kind of leave it there. And that's just how I was. That's how I did it. I was just kind of, say la vie, let it go. I'm pretty easygoing. But God began to say to me, your lack of discipline is causing you problems in your life. And you don't know it now, but you need to correct it now. Because in order for you to do and be all that I've called you to be, you are going to have to be a woman who is self-control, filled with self-discipline. So he began to speak to me and began to tell me, pick those clothes up off the floor. I would hear those whispers in my heart. Pick it up and put it in your closet. Don't leave that, don't leave that bowl in the sink. Put it in the dishwasher and take your foot off that pedal. You're driving too fast. And all these little different ways that God really began to work with me on self-control, and I really thought they're all so minor. Come on, God, but is it really that important if I leave my shoes in the middle of the floor, or if I put them in my closet? What difference does it make? I'm living by myself here. Nobody can even see it. And yet I would hear that voice, the voice of the Holy Spirit saying, pick it up, put it in its place. Everything has a place. Put it in its place. Do you know that if I kick my shoes off now in front of the doorway, which I kind of do sometimes, but my husband actually said those words to me a couple weeks ago. He said, because I've been praying, because maybe you can relate with this, but I'll set my phone down and then I'll spend 10 minutes looking for the phone and I don't know what I did with it, and sometimes I'm talking on it when I'm looking for it, but you know how that goes, right? So I can't find my shoes, or I can't find my purse, or I can't find my keys, or I can't find my sunglasses because I just set it somewhere, Anybody relate? I know you do because y'all are laughing. Yes. Well, I had my wallet stolen a couple weeks ago because I set it down and somebody picked it up and I didn't get it back, and it had quite a bit of money in it. And so and I said, God, I need help in this area. Help me. Help me to stay focused. Help me to be disciplined. Help me to not lose my stuff, God. The Holy Spirit He's concerned with all the things that concern you, and that really was becoming a problem in my life. I spent so much time looking for stuff. And so I just began to ask the Holy Spirit, help me to remember, help me to know what I'm doing with this stuff. And I said to my husband, I said, I'm really working on this. And so he knew, and I went to take off my shoes, and he looked at me one day and he goes, Amy, everything has a place. Yes, everything has a place. He said, if you will put your sunglasses in the same 2 spots every time you set them down, you will know where they are every time you go to look for them. If you will put your shoes in the closet where they belong, you will find them every time you need them. And so I began to do it, and I began to start to take my shoes off in the hallway, and I think, everything has a place. And so I'd walk to the bedroom, and I'd kick my shoes off in the closet, and I think, everything has a place. It requires discipline to do that because you think, oh, it doesn't matter. You just pop them off and on you go, but then you can't find them later. Everything has a place. If you want to be disciplined, you've got to exercise that muscle of self-discipline in the moment when you don't feel like doing it. You've got to resist the temptation to go with how you're feeling, and you've got to live out of your spirit man, out of another place. The same Spirit that raised Christ from the dead lives and dwells on the inside of you. Therefore, you are well able in the midst of emotional, trying circumstances to live and be led by the Spirit. You are well able to control those unruly emotions. But you have to make up your mind ahead of time. And I might add here, too, that a lot of times we spend our time arguing about things that really aren't the problem. You get into these conversations and you get into these arguments when you're in the heat of the moment, and you start nitpicking at the other person, or you start pulling up all of these things from the past, and you think, well, what about this, and what about this, and what about this? Before you engage in any kind of communication, before you engage in any type of activity, you've got to make sure that you are dealing with the root of the problem and not just the fruit. You can deal with the fruit of the problem forever and never get anywhere. But if you will go to God, if you will set time aside, if you will be intentional in how to resolve a conflict. One of the things that my husband and I always say is that we are 2 people working together on the same team to solve a problem. And if you will take that approach to every trial that you go through with that person that you're in relationship, we are 2 people working together to solve a problem, then you'll quit beating heads against each other, and you can address the real issue and not just the fruit that's coming out from it. Number 3, if you want to be a good communicator, you have to learn the absolutes. The 3rd absolute is never, ever, ever, ever resort to name calling. Now that sounds simple enough, but I hear people who are Christians. I hear what they say. I hear the way they talk about their spouse. I hear the words that they engage in, and the potty words that come out of their mouth. And you've just got to make up your mind. I don't care who you're around. I don't care if you listen to cursing all day long. You can make up your mind that you are not going to be defiled by that. And out of your mouth can flow goodness at all times. You have got to make up your mind that you are not going to resort to name calling. Do you think that it builds your husband up when you call him a jerk? You are such a jerk. You are such a jerk. what is that doing to your relationship? All you are doing is getting yourself in agreement with the devil. Is that what you want for your life? You want him to turn into a bigger jerk? Because I promise you, that's what's going to happen if you keep on telling him that. You've got to